And so it is. So welcome to Rails. The name we came up for this in staff planning meeting this morning was Advanced Intro to Rails. Just feels about right. So I want to walk through everything that you would need to do to create, read, update, and delete a resource in Rails. I want us to for sure get that far, and then we're going to throw some relationships in if we get time. So this first part, I'd like you to follow along with me. So we're going to make a new Rails app. Before I do it, I want you to think in your head, what's the command that I would have to run to start a new Rails app? Jordan, what is it?
Rails new something flag API.
Yep, very nice. And then let's call this app Dog Whisperer. Cool. You run this command also.
So it doesn't matter where you place API, like
Not actually. Like Rails is pretty flexible with that. Some people put it at the end. I like put it at the beginning of the command. I don't think it actually matters. Cool. So when you have that app scaffolded out, let's move into it. So we're in the Dog Whisperer app. First thing that I want to be able to do is show a dog. So we're going to approach this from the front to the back. A Rails app takes in HTTP requests, generates HTTP responses. So this is an HTTP request coming in. This is Rails. The thing that catches the HTTP request and tells it where it goes, Bryce, what's that called?
That's the controller.
Oop, almost. Before that, tells us which controller and which action on the controller to go to.
Route.
Yeah. So the router is going to catch this HTTP request, and it's the traffic cop. It goes, cool, that method and that path go to this controller and this action. So this is some controller, like the dog's controller. And inside of a controller, we've got actions. Those actions may interact with models. Different actions can interact with the same model. And then that model does stuff with the database for us. And then the action is going to generate the HTTP response. With a couple exceptions, This is what like 80% of Rails API things look like. Router catches an HTTP request, sends it to a controller, sends it to an action on the controller. That action probably interacts with a model. Model interacts with the database. Model delivers whatever it said it would to the action. Action generates the HTTP response. Cool. So let's do it. We go into the router, which is in config/routes.rb. We first thing we want to handle is I'm going to say let's list all dogs. We'll do that one first. So if we write that out longhand, Ben, do you know what I put here to make a single route for listing all the dogs? Unmute.
It's get dogs. Dogs are in quotes, and there's is there a slash? No slash. Comma 2 colon after the 2, and in quotes dogs #index.
Perfect. Very nice. So get is the HTTP method. Dogs is the path. So if I make an HTTP GET request to dogs, I want to send that to the dogs controller's index action. That's how that reads. So, all right. Well, that means I need to make a dogs controller. So I'm going to Rails generate, or Rails G, does the same thing. Controller dogs. You should do that too. Controllers are plural, models are singular. Why? Don't worry about it, just memorize it.
Because Kyle said so.
No, Kyle thinks it should all be singular, but Rails said so, and who am I to argue? All right, so we've got that controller. If I go into the controller that I just made, which is in app controllers dogs controller, I've got this empty controller here. So I said I was going to send this to the dogs controller's index action. So I make an index action. All actions are methods. So if like you're confused about why all through mod 1 we were calling these methods, and now I keep saying action for some reason. An action is a method on a controller. Your models can have methods also. Any class can have methods. Ones that we can route to on a controller, those are called actions. It's a subset. All right, so I've got this index here. And let's just say I wanted to like make an array as a variable. Dogs equals Scruffy, Fido, Bixby, Mesa, Harmony. All right, so I've just got some array of things here. If I want to send that back, use the render keyword, and then the JSON keyword, and maybe I do something like this. With just this, I should be able to see that list of dogs come back as an API. We give you a sec to get caught up. Your screen should look like this.
Kyle, I have an error.
Uh-oh, what's your error?
It is really, really long. And there doesn't seem to be any bold, like bullet point at either the top or the bottom.
Cool. Why don't you screen share with us real quick, Lynn, and let's figure it out.
We can do that.
All right, why don't you scroll up to the top of that error?
Oh, shoot, we set the wrong one. Oh, get this stuff out of the way. There it is.
Scroll up. All right, there we go.
So here's where I put in my Rails generate. I tried it also with Rails G instead of Rails generate and got the same thing.
All right, get up to the top and stop. All right. So, Rails with Kyle. Neat. Give me an LS real quick. Okay. Ooh, actually, press up. And then again. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Good. No, you did the API on there. How strange. Scroll up on that error just a little bit. I did see something. And stop. Already initialize constant value. I think you might have it already. So let's take a look in your file tree.
Oh, that's weird, because I don't have a controller for dogs.
So you don't. How strange. Keep scrolling up in your terminal window. For everybody else, if you've got that hard-coded controller action figured out, cool, stop there, Lynn. Then go ahead and run your Rails server and see if you can hit it in your browser and see some dogs show up. Okay, cannot load such a file, RBFS event. Keep scrolling up just a little bit. Stop. Cannot load such a file. It was called RBFS event. Okay, let's try this. Lynn, run gem install and then RB-FS event. There you go. Cool, very nice. Press up. Up. There we go. Try running that. Back up. Keep scrolling up. Weird. All right, let's touch base after this lesson. Let's get that debugged.
Sorry, everybody.
You're fine. All right, so if I do this and I Rails S and I go over to localhost 3000/dogs, cool. I should see something kind of like that. Badass. Questions? about anything we've done so far? Something that takes some getting used to is the syntax of this render. So let me write this out longhand. So if you're having trouble tracking the syntax on that, take a peek at this. Render is a method. We call it with a hash. The hash has a key of JSON, and we set that equal to whatever we want to send back. The only other thing that you should, I'll say one of the two things that you should know that you could also pass in is the status. OK is the default, but when we make something, we usually want to set that to created. If we delete something, we usually use no content. But if we want to send something back, we can also set that, send that back as a key. So this and this are identical.
Kyle, why do we use the hash dogs instead of just the array name?
Very nice. So yeah, we could do that. That works too. Response ends up looking like that.
Oh, cool.
The reason I would recommend name spacing would be the vocab word for that. Name spacing that under dogs is we might want to send some things back that aren't dogs. We might want to send back dogs and cats and an error message and some other meta thing. We might want to send back more information. So it would behoove us to design these APIs in such a way that we have that flexibility. If I just send back dogs and only dogs, I kind of don't have that flexibility anymore. And part of the good API design is we don't want dogs to work this way and then cats to have like a cat's hash. We want each of these endpoints to return something that's shaped kind of similarly. So that's why I'd recommend doing something at a minimum like that.
And does the status go inside the hash as well?
No, the status is at the same level as JSON. So that would be like that. So you're saying the JSON response that I want to send back is this hash. The status should be OK. Great question. What else?
Where would that status show up?
Oh, good question. So let's say I did status created. I run this server and run this. All right, I get it back. I don't see created anywhere. If I look at the network tab on my DevTools, status code. I made a GET request to this path and I got a 201 status code back. These are ways you hint to the browser whether or not the thing that just happened was good or bad. So anything that starts with a 2, that's good. 200, 201, 204, all those mean something successful happened. Even if it's deleting something, you successfully deleted it. If I get something that starts with a 4 back, means, uh-oh, you fucked up. You asked for something you shouldn't have asked for. Something that the browser did was dumb. That's stuff that starts with a 4. What's an example of a status that starts with 4 that you've probably been seeing your whole life?
404.
404. Not found. You asked for something that doesn't exist. So 404. 500s, anything that starts with a 5, that's I fucked up. That means I don't know whether the thing that you asked for is good or bad, but it sure did break the server. Rails crashed. Rails had a database error. Like anything that's the server's fault, that starts with a 5. So your browser can use those status codes to have a hint about whether or not something worked correctly. What else? Cool. So now let's make this dogs thing a little bit more real. So if I want to make a model, have a database, that kind of stuff, Bryce, give me a next step.
So next we should probably make a migration.
Ooh, we get a migration for free whenever we make a
Model.
There we go. How do I make a model?
Rails G model. And then the name of the model, so probably dog.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And then whatever attributes we want to give to it.
You can do those in the command line. We're going to do them in the text editor. But everybody should do a Rails G model dog, singular. Very good, Bryce. So you can see that it made this model file. It also made this migration file. Got it for free. I like free. All right, so then I go over here. If I hop into that migrations file, it's all there waiting for me to fill it out. So dogs are going to have a name and an age. So we'll do t.string name, and then t.integer age. So your migration should look like that. We can run that with Rails DB migrate. And if we see something like that, we done did good. While we're at it, let's make some seeds. Carlos, how do I make seeds?
Well, you go to your seed file and then you see what attributes you need. So for dogs, I think you had name.
Name and age.
Name, age. Sorry, my machine's kind of screwing up like limbs. So
Okay. So what do I do here?
so let's see, right there, you would do, let's say, dog1. Doesn't necessarily have to be capitalized, but then equals dog.create,
Good.
parentheses, and then you're going to do name, colon, whatever, Bixby, sure, comma, and then you'll do age. Yep, and then just a number.
Cool. So yeah, we can make these. You don't have to assign the variable if you're not using it anywhere. So they're really handy if like we also had a one-to-many with owners or something, and we want to assign the dog that we created to an owner instance or something. If we're just making dogs though, we can just run the create command all by itself.
So really, you would only use it if you're doing a one to or many to many.
Or a one-to-many or something like that. Something where we might need to make a dog and then assign the dog that we made into something else. If you're not doing that, you don't need to make a variable. One other thing that we should always do at the beginning of a seed file, Bob, can you think of what it might be?
Put dog.destroy all.
Oh, that's a little fucking grim. Fortunately, it's accurate. Basically, every time we want to be able to run this file over and over and over again, because when we're playing around with our Rails API, we're going to make records, we're going to delete records, we're going to do all kinds of stuff that changes the database, and we want to be able to have a button that we can press that gets us back to the starting place every time. That's what seeding is. So I can say Rails DB seed, and I don't know why this is the case in every single like database management framework I've ever used. You don't get anything back when you run the seed command. No like seeds ran successfully or anything like that. So if you don't see anything, it worked right. And now I should be able to go back to that controller. Instead of hard coding these dogs, I can do dog.all. And shoot, that should just work. Let's see if it does. Hey, that looks like my boy and my girl. Questions thus far? Have the request coming in, router sends it to the right action on the right controller. We are saying, hey model, give me all those dogs. The model says, hey database, give me all those dogs. Database gives the dogs back to the model. Model gives the dogs back to the action. Action renders the response. Cool. So next thing, let's say I want to also be able to get a single dog. Kyle, can you give me an idea of where to get started with that?
If you wanted a single dog, I would assume somewhere you're gonna have to do a dog.find based on the name or the age, whichever one.
You are correct. Although we can also do it by ID. So that's going to end up being over here. So do you remember what the action's called?
I do not remember the find action.
It starts with an S.
Search?
Close. Starts with an SH.
I don't know. Show?
Show. There we go.
There we go.
Index is show me everything. Show is show me one thing. So this one. It's going to largely look the same. But what goes in that dog thing? Logan, what do you think?
What are we trying to find by?
ID.
ID. So then you'll want class of dog dot find, and then the number that you're particularly looking for.
Okay. So let's say I only want to get back the first dog ever. All right. But I can't even get to this action yet. Logan, can you think of what I have to do to get to this action?
Similar to how we did the index in the routes file, we'll need to do a index or a show in the routes.
Yeah. So what's the rest of that going to look like? Is it also a GET request?
Yes.
Okay. Then it can't be the same path. Otherwise, it's always going to go to this index. So what changes in the path?
Singular dog.
Something like that?
Probably, but if it blows up, we know we did something wrong.
Okay. So I Rails S. And I go, cool, give me back dog number 1. Hey, there's dog number 1. It didn't blow up. But what if I want to get Mesa? I've hard-coded that ID in. That's probably not all that useful in API endpoint. Anybody, can you think of what I got to change so that I can make it so I can get any dog?
Params.
Params, all right. What's that Params business about?
I'm not entirely sure, but you put params and then put ID in bracket notation.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks kind of like that. Where's Params ID come from? Anybody know?
Does it stand for the search parameters are ID?
Almost.
You put it at the end of your file path in your routes.
Yeah. So this is actually going to stay plural dogs. But we're going to put this thing in here called a dynamic segment. Dynamic segment, it's not literally dogs/:ID. What this is saying is no matter what I put here, I want this router to make that a variable that I can access with params and then whatever the name of that is. ID isn't magical. I could call it dogs fart and then look it up that way. But that's the connection there. It's going to look for this dynamic segment in the routes, and then I'm going to be able to use that as a variable over here. Questions about that?
What did you say that was called one more time?
Dynamic segment. So each part of, because like this could be arbitrarily long. I could have animals, mammals, /dogs. So each little piece of that is called a segment. And then any one of those that I want to be a variable is called a dynamic segment. So this could be phylum or whatever. What else?
So when you change things like that, you would separate it in your request with just the / and then your new thing and then.
Exactly. So let's run it. Server's up. If I do dog/1, I get back Bixby. If I do dog/2, I get back Mesa. Dynamic.
So if how you set up the that dynamic parameter.
Mhm.
You set it up by ID. Can you set it up by name too? Or either or?
Yeah, totally could. So we got to change a little bit of code, but I could do something like make that a name. Now, this isn't going to work. Can anybody tell me why?
Find only finds by an ID.
Find only finds by an ID. Very nice. So what do I change to make so I can look it up by anything?
Make it find by, and then in parentheses, you're going to have to do name colon.
Oh, beautiful. You guys are doing great. So yeah. Now let's see what changes when we run this. So now that's not going to work because there's no dog with the name of 2, but I can do dog/Bixby and get nothing back. Oh, it's because it's capital B, I think. There we go. What if I wanted to make it case insensitive? What would I do?
Did you do dot down case on the name?
Yep, exactly what you'd do. So if I do the Railsy way to do it would be something like params name dot down case. Like that. Works for me. Okay, so does this still work? Not camel case. Oh shoot, that's not gonna work anyway. So what that's gonna do is it's always gonna make my input lowercase, even though the one in my database is upcased, or title cased, I mean. Any guesses how I could get around that? What was that?
Downcase dot capitalize after the downcase.
So.
Or change your database.
Yeah, so we could do downcase and then, is it capitalized? Might be. Let's see what that does. Rails or Ruby string capitalize. I feel like that does all of them, but nope, that's right. Good call. So downcase and then capitalize, and then it'll look it up that way. So let's see how flexible that made it. Does this work? That works. Does lowercase Bixby work? That works. Does weird case Bixby work? So it does. Badass. Lots of flexibility.
So, do you always just want one show method per controller, or would it be okay to make multiple to find either by ID or name? Or would that be weird and not worth it?
So what I would do, if I wanted to be able to like do by either, probably do something like maybe.
Can you do like if else's in those?
You absolutely can. You can write any kind of logic you want. So what if we did something like this? If you do just /dogs, give me every dog. Unless there's a param for by name. So if there's a by name param, Then this is dog.find by name, params by name. And then send them back. So then we run this. I can get all the dogs. And then I can also put a query param in for by name equals Bixby. And that'll just give me Bixby back.
Could you go back to your editor real quick?
Yep. Now, Kyle, you're probably asking, params, but we used that for the dynamic segment earlier. You're just throwing stuff at the end of the URL now. And we also get that through params? Yes. Params, Rails will just jam together any of the like data that you send over, and it just puts it in one place called params. So a few different ways we can send data over in a request like that. Params kind of normalizes all those out.
Could you say that again?
Yep. So if I, here, this dynamic segment, that should be, go back to being ID. So that dynamic segment, that's on params. I do /dogs/34. And I said in the router that everything after dogs, I want to throw that in a variable called ID. So it's around in a thing called params ID. I can also send data by like /dogs ? And then we have these key value pairs here. By name is the key, Bixby is the value. So I look up params by name, that'll be Bixby.
To add additional ones, would you just throw more question marks in?
No, good question. Ampersand. You can only have one question mark, but you can have as many key value pairs as you want. You separate them with ampersands. And that entire thing together is called the query string.
So you could use this to find, let's say, find by name Bixby that is age of 22, but they both have to be.
Yeah, you could do both of those. I want every dog named Bixby whose age is 22. That gives me every dog who has the first name Bixby and is 22 years old. That's called filtering. And those kinds of filters generally go in query parameters.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in just some of the reading, it was talking about how most of your like logic stuff like this should be in models, but is it appropriate to do like this if else stuff in your controller, or is it generally?
Great question. This should go in the controller because it's specifically about the request. I have one request that has two different forms to it. That doesn't have anything to do with the dog. If like, let's say I had a dog first name and a dog last name, and I wanted to be able to get their full name, writing out that logic in the controller wouldn't make sense. That should go in the model. And that might look something like, and now I can do things like, if I get a dog back from the database, I can do dog dot full name. That kind of logic should go in models. If it's about the request, that logic goes in the controller. It's a very subtle distinction. What else? So let's say I want to delete a dog. Austin Evans, can you give me an idea of somewhere I could start? Unmute.
So we're gonna have to write a delete method in the controller, but
So it's not called delete when it's an action. The names matter for these method names. Starts the same.
draw.
Destroy. Okay, so I've got that method in there. What else am I doing, Austin?
We're gonna have to make a route for the destroy.
Cool. What method do we usually destroy things with?
Delete.
Yeah, very nice. Austin, what other things do I need in this route?
We're probably gonna have to find it by the one we want to delete by the ID.
Yeah. So what goes in here?
Dog slash colon ID.
Love it. Then what? Follows the same pattern as the ones above.
Then the 2 colon and then dogs. Would it be destroy there?
Yeah. Whenever I get a delete request to dog slash something, send that over to the dog's controller's destroy action. That's how that reads. Now, we've got a few of these routes in here. If we were doing the other ones, you send an update request for a dog, that should go to the dog's update action. If you send a post request to dogs, that should go to a dog's create action. Now there's a shorthand for those 5 routes. Does anybody know what it is?
Resource.
Resources, dogs. Resources? Resource? I always get this mixed up. Rails.
I think you're right, resources.
See if they've got. I always have to look it up.
What's the command you run to see it in the terminal?
Yeah, it's resources. What was that?
What's the command you type in the terminal to show which 5 are included or whatever?
Oh, Rails routes.
Rails routes. Right.
So if I do resources, that's the same as doing these 5. So they follow a pattern. If we call it index, if we call it show, if we call it destroy, if we call it update, if we call it create, if our routes follow that format of dogs, dog/id, 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 dogs. We do something like that convention, then we get all that stuff for free. That's convention over configuration. Follow this pattern, I'll give you tons of free code. Now, we still only have those 3 routes though. Anybody know how I can restrict those to just the 3 that we actually have?
Only.
So I can say I have an index, I have a show, I have a destroy. That's the Rails way to do that. You should know how to write your own, like, just raw route handler. You'll need to do that in the program still. But the other 80% of the time, you're writing it like this. All right, so I've got this destroy action. Chris Banta, can you tell me what I would do in the destroy action?
You're going to use the same find method as above to go find the one you're going to destroy.
Yeah. Okay. And then what do I do?
And then you're going to destroy that instance.
It's a life, Chris. All right, so I've destroyed it. Anybody know what I send back? I don't send back the dog that I destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore.
The remaining dogs.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Or
Now,
not.
like, I can see why you'd think that, but now imagine I have 1 million dogs in the database. I'm the ASPCA.
Send back.
Send back what?
Send back a message that it was completed.
Yeah. Or I could send back a status code that kind of implies that it sort of kind of went okay. So I could render status okay. That works. The conventional one is no content. That's a 204. And since it starts with the 2, we kind of hint to the browser that, like, hey, I don't have anything to send back, but like it worked. Cool. Does it work? By Rails S. I see all my dogs. All right, well, there's 2 dogs there. But how am I going to test this out? How do I send a delete request with a browser?
You can't right now.
I can't. I can't ever. So how do I do it?
Postman.
Postman. Postman. Come together with your hands. Save me. Oh. God, I have 2 instances of Postman on here. And somehow I managed to always pick the wrong one. So Postman is a headless browser. Like a headless horseman, but, you know, like a browser. Gives me way more fine-grained control over these requests. So I can pick a method, punch in the path. Sorry, Bixby. So I'm sending a delete request to that route. And when I send it, I get back a 404 not found. Uh-oh. Oh, it's because I still have the wrong thing in there. Let's just find. Like that. Rails S. All right, let's give it a shot now. 204 no content came back, and unsurprisingly, there is no content there. But if I change that to a GET request, hey, all I got's Mesa. Dope. Questions? The two other things that you need to be confident that you can do with Rails are update. So that's going to be dog. Actually going to do it start the same way. We'll find the dog and then call active records update method. Name. Age. And then send back our updated dog. Ta-da! Creating a dog works kind of the same way. Except this is going to be capital D dog.create. And then you just send it on back. You do all those things, you're good to go. You can create, read, update, and delete a resource. And that's what you got to be able to do for Mod 2. Questions? Cool. That's it. Have a good lunch, everybody. I think I'm doing HTML. That sounds about right. I think I'm doing HTML at 1. If you're interested in intro to that. Elsewise, I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good lunch, everybody. You're welcome.